Hey viewers, how you doing? I wanted to talk about the Frankfurt S-Bahn. First thing I'm going to do is go through Matt's reply to what a lot of people have been posting on the forums, and then I'm going to flip over and I'm going to go through what you've been saying on a couple of posts that I've made about this, asking you questions. Now, before we get into this, yes, I'm an ambassador. DTG do not tell me what to say though. They just expect me to be constructive about it. Now, I also want to make it really clear up front, I'm disappointed about having a reduced timetable on consoles. I'm a combo PC and console player. I can tell you a little bit about some of the chat that's been going on between the ambassadors. Not a lot, because a lot of it's covered by our NDA, unfortunately. But I can say that there's essentially two camps. The PC-only players don't see a problem. And that doesn't surprise me, to be honest. The PC and console combo players, like myself, like Hentus, like British Ace, like Tintin, we see a problem. And the console-only players see a problem. I think it's not about console versus PC, because they are quite different hardware. And one can do a lot more than the other, and that's just a given. That's a fact of life. But what is an issue here is that parity for players for price. I think that's the important way to say it. Parity for players for price. Because one group of players is paying the same price, but they're getting a different level of functionality. And I don't think that's right. But anyway, let me go through Matt's comments. I'm going to read them verbatim, and I may talk about some of them as well. So there's been a long-running thread on this on the forum, and I have to say most people are actually being fairly constructive this time, which is not the norm on those forums. I don't know if you visit there regularly. I do, but I rarely post. And the reason I go there is I like to see how you feel. But anyway, let's go through this. So Matt has said, so I'll lead by saying that I understand the frustrations and we are working hard to improve things. If hearing my say we are working hard to solve it is just making you mad, then I'm sorry, there's not much more I can do. Just ignore anything that I say going forwards and wait for changes in the game. For everyone else, I'll try and keep you updated. Now, I will just interject at this point, there are teams working on this at DTG. I know for absolute 100% and certain that there are. They're looking at things like memory. They're looking at things like textures. They're looking at things like shadows. This is stuff that I can tell you about because it's been talked about publicly. I'll get into what that means later. Anyway, Matt's gone through various people's comments and we'll go through them. Now, I'm not going to call out the names of the people. I'm sure you can see them there, but I'm not going to call out individuals because that's not a great thing to do. The first comment is, I've looked at the specs. PS5 and the current Microsoft machine are as hefty as many current PCs. It's clearly a software issue at this point. And Matt says, not really. The consoles have 16 gig of RAM, but it's set up differently. PCs will swap to disk rather than crash. Consoles will just crash. PCs have dedicated VRAM on top of that 16 gig of RAM. Consoles don't. Consoles seem to suffer from memory fragmentation more than PCs. All sorts of things are different. We have lower spec PCs than a Gen 9 console running the root fine. Now, what I would get into there is what Matt's talking about is basically there's essentially in a PC, there's two kinds of RAM. There's the RAM that's sitting on your main board, and that's normally DDR4 or DDR5, and it's usually relatively quick RAM, and it talks to your CPU. So your CPU is, I'm not going to say it's in charge of the RAM because that's not quite right. There's other chips. But the chipset works with the CPU to use that RAM. And that's where the game runs. All of the stuff that's being drawn, all of the rendering, all of the pictures that you see, the video that you see, that's done by your GPU. The GPU has its own memory, and that's usually DDR5 or DDR6 on a recent card. And that's extremely fast, wide bus memory. It's not narrow 8, 16 or 32-bit like you'll find in the rest of it. It's much wider. Consoles also have a wider RAM bus. If you look at the specs, some of them are as high as 192 bits. So it is quite different RAM architecture. Now, that separation means that when the PC's starting to suffer for issues around what the game's doing, the video's still fine. When the video's starting to suffer, the game's still fine. Whereas on a console, if your video's starting to suffer, your game's starting to suffer, and vice versa, because they're sharing the same memory at the same time. The next comment is, it's crazy for the last couple of years we've been tracking the slow demise of Gen 8 consoles, and we're now doomed to spend the next 2 years watching a diminution of the game on 9th gen. Console sales are the lifeblood of TSW. Without console players, TSW cannot prosper. They appear to be self-sabotaging. And Matt replied, the Frankfurt route is the single most complex route we've ever made. Nothing compares to it. So I don't support the idea that this means we're descending to zero path here. Every route we make pretty much is going to be less in some way than this one. Consoles are still massively important to us, and that's why, as I've said, we're working to improve the situation. Now, I have seen publicly stated that consoles are 80% of the train sim world market, so consoles are very important to DTG, because the people on PCs, 20%, minority. The next one is release both timetables as you've already spent the effort required to make it. And carries on, the goodness sake, the PS4 has a full West Coast mainline timetable, with CL3 of course, and can toggle layers, same to the East Coast mainline. So it seems like the precedent is to release both and slow the player to toggle layers. Can that not just be what happens here? Matt says, then the game will be unplayably crash every time. Even turning off layers doesn't help because of the sheer size of the timetable data files it has to load regardless. I didn't think that would be acceptable. I tend to agree with him there. If it just crashes every time you run, that's not really useful. In the next comment, AI-driven vehicles in GTA get swapped out for a better simulated model when the player gets into one. This means there is only one simulated model on the road at any given time, as all the other cars share a simplified AI handling model. This is something that Rockstar's custom engine can do natively, but is not possible in Unreal Engine or any other commercially available engine. Rockstar's engine also scales down model complexity as the model is further away from you, saving on both CPU and GPU load. Now, I'm going to tell you what Matt's going to say here, because this is funny. This is exactly what Unreal does. So Unreal definitely does do it. But it's also built into the game, and Matt replies, TSW does this too. All trains are running on a simplified physics model, or your FPS would tank to zero. Level of detail, or LOD, is implemented on all 3D assets, and we separate the visuals/audio of vehicles away from the physics and performance models, so that if a train is not near you, we don't have those assets loaded into memory. We've done a lot of work building it that way from the ground up, and further work optimizing it since. What he's basically saying is that if you can't see it, it's not drawn, it's not making sound, it's not doing anything. And yeah, that's about as good as you're going to get with that sort of thing. Another comment was, although it would be nice if DTG used the extra 1.5 gigabytes of RAM, it would at least delay how long the memory takes to cause problems. So he's talking about the PS5 Pro there. Matt says, I wish it was just as easy as using the extra memory. That would require upgrading the core SDK used to talk to the console and rebuilding, retesting, uploading all content. And honestly, the number of PS5 Pro players on TSW is really small, so I'd rather find solutions that help access Xbox S and X and PS5 players. That's where the majority of people are. So there we go. That's where the majority of people are. There's another illusion that consoles are huge. The next statement was, if DTG cannot solve the optimization issue, and if this route is not successful, they might choose to stick to more mundane routes with simpler track work, trains, and scenery elements. Matt says, as noticed above, technically every route or thereabouts is simpler track work, trains, and scenery elements than this one. I do actually think that there's a point there. It is going to limit the routes going forward, because it has to. Because of this particular issue, people are so unhappy. The natural reaction is the developers are going to take a step back and go, okay, we're not building anything that big again because it doesn't work. And what will probably happen is next time we'll end up with 3 S-Bahn routes. And they won't interchange. The next comment was, I know you're only a messenger, but it's complicated. It's just another version of we're working on, and frankly, that's not good enough. It's interesting that he calls Matt a messenger. Matt's the executive producer of the game. He's one of the decision makers. So he's not really just a messenger. Matt says, I can either report progress and reply to feedback, or I can just stop posting. Happy to go with the preference. People want to make a vote. It gets frustrating, I agree. All I can say is we've diverted a fairly significant number of people to look into this. Beyond that, only results matter. The next comment is, although only 9th gen, will it work via Xbox PC gaming? Even if you have an 8th gen system, can someone at DTG confirm, please? Matt says, if I'm understanding you correctly, regardless of a console gen you own, if you download the PC version via Xbox Store onto your PC, you'll get the full PC version. If you mean via xCloud, that runs the Gen 9 console version and we'll get the cut down version. Sorry, I still have the ongoing cough thanks to COVID months ago. Matt updated his post a little bit later and says, okay, quick update. Seeing some potential improvements in a few areas, including one substantial rework of how track is managed that could save a good chunk of memory. It won't solve the problem, but it is a big leap in the right direction if it all works out. That one is being finished for testing this week. Beyond that, we've identified that the addition of distant field shadows a couple of versions ago is responsible for a massive loss of memory that hadn't been seen before, as it seemed to be untracked within Unreal. We're exploring whether this is valid or not and see what our options are. As far as untracked memory within Unreal, that's the whole new can of worms we're uncovering and working with an external partner developer to understand more about, as it seems other games developers are discovering this too. It may turn out to be really important or nothing, but it's a thread to pull. These two could potentially bring all or most of the timetable back, but we're still exploring and testing. We've made one change related to the distant field shadows and it broke all shadows, so there's no guarantees here. There are a number of other areas being looked at as well, some specific to Frankfurt, some more general. The DFS one would help all routes, for example, if it pans out. I assume that means they need to be rebuilt. Sorry. This is all exploration and debugging. I can't give you any timelines of where things are at, but I wanted to say we're not leaving stones unturned and are challenging everything where it's at isn't acceptable. So I think Matt's been really clear there. It isn't acceptable. All right? Not even DTG are saying this is an acceptable situation. So I'm going to flip back to my community here specifically. And yes, this is very unpolished. Apologies. Let's make it a bit bigger so you can read it. I popped up a couple of polls. And the outcomes were fairly, I guess, predictable, really. The first one was a question for Gen 9 console players, re Frankfurt folder. And it was about, is a reduced timetable okay? 31% of people, and it was 49 votes, so it's not a small sample, but it's not a huge sample either. 31% of people said the reduced timetable is okay. 69 said I prefer reduced, but I want full for me to choose at my own risk. So we know, for example, that with the full timetable on Mold Bay, we get blurry textures. They suck. There's no way around that. They just suck. But let's get rid of that. Have more space. People might trade that off for having more trains. I don't know. But it's perhaps a choice that people should be allowed to make for themselves. Now, I will say that most of my community are I think, PC players, but I have a reasonable portion of console players, and I actually think that the vote on the next one represents the percentage. So it's a bit interesting. I should say could represent the percentage, because I have no evidence. This next one, I said, question about Frankfurt S-Bahn, should Gen 9 and PC be released at parity? If Gen 9 can only have 600 services, then should PC also only have 600 services for fairness? Note that console is 80% of the train sim world market. I felt comfortable saying that because I've actually seen it published. And the poll results was, and it got 82 votes this time, so it's a better sample. Yes, Gen 9 should set the maximum. That's probably my console players. No PC should not be constrained by Gen 9 capability, 62%. So I thought this was actually relatively predictable because I think this is reflective of the percentage of console players versus PC players that are in my community on my channel. I just feel that. Like I said, I have no evidence. But interestingly, there was a lot of commentary and I'm going to run through these, and I've tried to reply to everybody. If I've missed anyone, then apologize for that. I'll try and find them. YouTube lately's changed the way it manages comments. There's actually 2 places you have to go and look for comments now, and it when you want to see the new ones, and it's a bit annoying, but I've tried to get to everyone. Again, I won't read out the names, but you can see them. And these are genuine comments on my channel. So they really reflect what the player base is feeling. And this one says, well, I can understand them not wanting to hold back the game for PC players, but they really have to reduce the price for current gen console version. Selling it at the same price with a significantly reduced number of services and so a lot less hours of gameplay is a ridiculous situation. And visually, the console experience just won't be good with a much emptier route. It's not like you can easily change to PC from console, because if you've spent hundreds on DLCs, potentially thousands, the last thing you want to do is have to buy it all again for use on PC. If this becomes the norm, I can see a lot of people on consoles stopping playing the game. Who wants reduced services? Who wants to see empty looking routes? So it's a difficult situation. My reply on this one is that it's a difficult situation for sure, so I definitely agree. Out on the run, you're not going to see a huge difference except at the terminus stations. And this is from experience, but I can't go into details. Not allowed. They'll be empty. It could certainly be marketed better. The conversation would be different if console had the standard timetable and PC had enhanced. With one having reduced, it really rubs in that you're missing out on something. I tend to agree that either the console gets a discount or the extra is a bonus that PC people could buy above the base price. Either way, it would be more fair. What I mean by that is potentially splitting the extra services into another DLC that you could buy. So the route, let's say the route was $10, and for another $1 you could buy these extra 400 services. And only PC people could buy them. I think that would be more fair. Of course, the prices are made up. The next comment was, it's okay that the console version has less services, but the price has to be less than the PC version 1. DTG is taking advantage that on console, the market, there are no trains driving games to make competition to TSW, except for the newly released Subway Sim 2. And my reply was, I tend to agree it should either be cheaper on console or the extra services on PC are a DLC that people can opt into buying. And what's been said there is quite right. There actually isn't much competition at this time for train simulators on console. That's on the verge of changing. So Railroader has announced that they will go to console once they're happy with the game. Subway Sim 2 is on console. Century of Steam has talked about console, but a bit non-committal. What's the other one? The Polish one. Forgotten what it's called. Isn't that terrible? I've actually forgotten what it's called. Let me just pop into Steam and... oh yeah, Simrail. That's right. Simrail is coming to console. So it's about to change. I don't know if it'll change the way things are done or the way things are seen or if it'll change the game in any way, but, you know, we'll see. Competition is always a good thing. And even though I've got that funny little flag down in the left-hand corner down there that says I'm an ambassador, I play lots of simulation games. I don't just stick to DTG stuff. Anybody that watches my channel knows I play just about everything. So, yeah. I think competition and new games will be very good for everybody. The next comment was, I think it should be equal across the board with the same for both. I think that would reduce the number of bugs to be dealt with and give some optimization for both. If they're not tailoring it to suit individual system needs, that's going to cause more headaches for the engineering team at DTG. I agree with another fellow that said as console players should get things cheaper as they don't get the full thing. I see it as I'm a console player. And I said, fair enough, Bod, thanks. And I talked about his modeling because that's what his channel name is. Now, one thing to talk about here is it's always a different build for the consoles. You can't take the same software and run it on a different architecture. It doesn't work. You have to have a specific build for each architecture that you target. So there will always be separate builds. There will always be things that are console only. To a large extent, the Unreal Engine takes care of that by itself, but the game has to take care of it too. Storage is different. Permissions are different. Security is different. The way it handles RAM is different. The way its CPU works is different. So there's a lot of differences to deal with. So there will always be separate builds. Unfortunately, it's a nightmare for people who build software for both PCs and consoles. The next one says, if consoles are 80% of their market, why is the game so badly optimized for them? It's not worth playing anymore. I think there's keywords there, not worth playing anymore. I have seen that sentiment a bit. I, for one, have given up on it. Over 6 months of crashing and blurred textures, nothing has improved, just more and more layers and timetables on an already poor-performing game. And I replied, you make good points. I do know they're working on memory changes. I just hope everyone knows that more it is optimized, the more like TSC or Train Sim Classic it will become. Optimization is basically stripping back textures and features like shadows and good-looking water. The response was, no, I wasn't aware of that, but something needs to be done. If that's the solution, then so be it. As long as it's playable in the current state, I don't find it fun. So I think there's a bit of a view sometimes about, I hear the words lazy developers. They're not. But sometimes they do get a bit too enthusiastic about introducing new features. I look at things like working lifts, working escalators, things like that. Yeah, sure, it's an interesting novelty, but do we really need to use memory up on it? It's a train game. Enough said there, I think. But it's important that people do understand what optimization actually means. It does mean reducing the fidelity of textures so that they use less memory. It means changing the shadows so that you can maybe only see them closer or maybe not see them at all in a worst case scenario. If you take shadows away from Unreal Engine, it really does look like Train Sim Classic. It's almost identical. It's quite uncanny. You can't do that in the normal game, but you can do it in some versions. They are working on it, definitely are. But anyway, on to the next one. I've had time to think about it and keep it short. The route on console reminds me of Munchen Augsburg when it's first released on console. Then in long run, we did get the services on it, and Matt did say recently that Munchen signals were the worst to do until they had Frankfurt, and all the tracks leading out of the station. So my hope one day is we get the services and come to the route. If not, I'll just wait to get it cheaper, and I'll say the DTG should have put in the article Gen 9 services and PC services. What they put was the reason. First, wasn't happy at all. Now I'm just disappointed we don't get stuff, but I get why from Matt's comments. So the person's had an opportunity to read through Matt's comments and understands a bit more of the why. So I think Matt explaining it is helpful to the community, to the people who are willing to listen. Not everybody is, but it doesn't make the pill any easier to swallow. So I replied, I understand the feeling of unfairness, and I imagine it does help to know a bit more about the why, not just it's like that, live with it. The next one is console version should be properly discounted, 40% for 40% less services. And I replied, I can understand why you feel that way. I do tend to agree with it, to be honest. I don't think it's fair that it's both. Now, this guy, I'll name him, Grumpy Englishman, he's a member of my channel. He's been around for ages. We have a lot of robust discussions. And this one's not really any different, although it's probably a little politer here on YouTube. Some of the stuff we talk about directly is more upfront. But anyway, he says 2 separate games should always have been. It's that simple. If we start getting reduced stuff on PC because of consoles, then I will stop with TSW. He actually says that every time the leaves move. Say what you will, but consoles is and always holds back the game, even if Gen 9 has nothing on a PC gaming rig. 2 separate games, 2 separate teams. And I asked him how he would know if it was reduced. And he said the fact they have to reduce the timetable for consoles already shows there should have been 2 separate games. It really is separate games. Can't make a game on PC and then expect consoles to work for the same standards. It's a simple fact. That is quite correct. It is a simple fact. The console is a much less capable of machine than a medium upwards gaming PC. Pretty similar to a lower end gaming PC. The console, if you needed to compare it, it's roughly the equivalent of an i5, about fairly high range specs though, so about the 10,000 mark. And the RAM is usually faster, it's DDR5 or DDR6, and it's wide, so it's usually quicker than PC RAM. But anyway, he says the reason PC players are so small now is because a lot of players left no really progress since The Sims started in terms of simulation. TSW will basically be the same as FIFA, EA Football, basic, the same every engine, every year, basic, same game every year. I don't actually think that's true. The game has changed a lot over the years when you look back from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. If you load them all up and play them sequentially, it has actually changed each time. So, yeah, but, you know, people believe what they want to believe, and that's fine. And I suggested I think the PC is small because it's marketed to consoles. It always has been ever since TSW2. That's been their unique thing. PC players have a bit of spice like Raildriver and modding and better graphics, but that's about it. And I did also say, I'm pretty sure you agree with me, because kind of behind the scenes he does. But he says, I can't see much happening in the future for TSW and its current game engine, unfortunately. We need something different, a career mode maybe, that matters, or something it's all pretty much the same. Even the roots follow a pattern. DTG need to do something to ignite the fires again. Now, this one I do actually kind of agree with. So I said I tend to agree with that. New routes for me are fun for a while, then I'll go back to them sometimes using quick play for the challenge of never knowing what you'll get. I spend a lot more hours in Railroader these days in the games I really play on my channel, which are mostly adventures and puzzlers, that sort of thing. Mainly because I'm too slow to play first-person shooters these days, which makes me sad, but that's okay. Psych asked, why should I upgrade my Series X? Sorry, why should my upgrade to Series X not even last one version of the game? And a bit facetious because I have a good relationship with the guy. I says, because you updated it too late. Because, you know, he waited a long time. But I do understand why he feels that way. He thinks Microsoft's next console is coming 2027, 2028, and he's going to move to PC. He's one of the lucky ones that can, I guess. And we talked back and forth about the consoles, but I haven't really seen anything about an announcement there. Rativus and I are another one where we have good, strong conversations. He says the key issue is that consoles have plenty of resources, system and GPU memory, but the game is not optimized for consoles. That's what they're finally looking at now. I don't think that's actually true. If they must release a reduced version on consoles, 40% services and no AI services, and the console price should reflect that, say a 40% reduction. I will touch on that. There are AI services. Definitely are. I was going to buy this if it was cheaper, but having seen the empty stations, I think I'll pass and see what transpires. Shame though. I did reply that I don't really think that's true. Optimization means reduced texture detail, removal or reduction of shadows, and more baked lighting instead of specular lighting. It'll end up looking like Transcend Classic. And I have talked about, you know, the console. It is optimized for console because it's got console-specific builds. But yes, they're trying to do some more. Excuse me. The next one, which is in reply to Ratty, it still costs the same to create a route from scratch. If they should reduce the price depending on timetable size, then does it mean if you own no layers, you should get a 90% discount? It just doesn't work like that. That one I replied, I don't see that as a valid argument, to be honest, because layers are extra to the route that provide additional content that come from other places. The route and its timetable is at the base, the content that comes with the route. The other things are a bonus that make use of existing content that you already have licensed. Layers don't really change the memory much either, because the timetable has to be there regardless of whether you've got the layer or not. This person says, I can't think of another game that gives consoles less content. PC often gets more graphical options, but not less actual game. Dovetail had a PC game. They wanted us to sell it to console player gamers. If they can't be bothered to optimize their games so it runs well on console, maybe console gamers should stop spending money with them. He says, I have TSW5 on both console and PC, so I guess I could choose the version I want, but I'm tempted to close my wallet for a few months. And I replied, would you be surprised that TSW is a console build that also builds to PC? Console has always been the main target market. It only came out on PC first, which was TSW 2020 CS6 Heavy Haul, because prototyping to public is easier on PC than console. I can't comment on your thought about other games that might have more or less on console. I know of games that are only on one or the other, but I don't think I have enough knowledge about console gaming to make a comment, as I've always been PC primary, despite the Xbox, which is sitting to my left, glaring at me as I type this, going, what do you mean I'm not your bestie? Sorry, Xbox. There's actually two of them sitting there. There's an S and an X. But anyway, that's about it. So it's an interesting situation, I think. I do tend to agree that in the current state, the console players are getting less. The console players have a right to feel miffed about this. I think most of the people who are commenting on my channel are being really constructive, and I appreciate that. I certainly appreciate your candor. I do carry all this feedback back to DTG, as all of the ambassadors do. It is interesting to me on the internal ambassador discussion. The only thing I can say about it is it's very clear who is a PC-only player who's a mixed player and who's a console-only player. And I can assure you that the discussions in the Ambassador Forum that DTG are in there with us have been very robust. So the ambassadors, I think, despite the opinion of some, we really are supporting your community into DTG. We really are supporting what we're told. We carry the messages in, and we have strong discussions to try and make sure the message is understood and make sure that people are hearing what the community is feeling and actually understanding it as well. So we do provide a bit of a translation conduit, I guess. I'm hopeful for the future because I've seen a lot of work going on behind the scenes to try and address making it run at parity across console and PC. My expectation is that as we go forward, we will probably see less complex routes. I think they will have smaller runs, less stations, less detailed assets. That's just what I think is going to happen. Because when the game started with, let's just say it started with TSW2, because that was the first console version, really. It was a bit of a flicker before that, but let's just say that's the first one. Keep it simple. The routes that came out with that were about parity in detail with Train Sim Classic. So not amazing, in other words. Oh, good, but not amazing. Gradually, as each version stepped up and new features have come, things like volumetric fog, the nice specular lighting that came with that, the time of day 4, which is the nice sunsets and sunrises. Even the daytime lighting's gotten a little bit better in 5 recently. The higher fidelity on buildings, the higher fidelity on trains. And a lot of work goes into the trains because if you've got a lot of polygons to draw, just using some graphics terminology, I apologize, but you've got tons of polygons to draw. That's a lot of complex maths, and it really bogs the computer down. So when you see those beautiful curved surfaces on the trains, because train designers love their curved surfaces these days, unless you're in America where they love boxes. See, boxes are easy. Right angles, good stuff. Easy to calculate, easy to draw. Curves, no. Because all sorts of weird lighting and shadows happen on curves. It eats CPU and it eats memory. But anyway, the people who actually build the train models take an enormous amount of care to minimize the polygons, and they use textures to give the appearance of a curved surface. So the curve isn't really there anymore. It is straight angles. It just looks curved because of the actual texturing and the way they've drawn it. It's very, very clever. One thing you'll probably see as the mod community get into building trains, and I have started to see it, is these massively high polygon things that will drive your frame rate into the ground, even on a really capable gaming machine like the one I've got. You'll just hurt. But they'll learn that lesson, and they will learn how to develop their models, and they will learn how to represent curves and all those kinds of things, and the world will grow. So I think we're in for an interesting future. We'll see where it goes. We know that there are some changes coming, so don't panic. I know not everybody feels it, but I will say Matt's got your back. I know Matt personally. I've actually talked to him face to face, even though we're in different countries. And he's a really genuine guy, and he really loves the game, and he loves to support the community. He can't always do it, of course, because he's got the weight on his shoulders. He's got to weigh up commercialization versus supporting the community. And it's a balance. Which one do you do? And he's trying to do both. He always does. But the reality is DTG has to be a viable commercial enterprise or they won't exist. And, the developers do try really hard. They definitely do. They do know their stuff. There's clever people in there. So give them the benefit of the doubt on that, if you could. And, we'll see what comes. We'll see what the future brings us. Alrighty, that's about enough yakking, I guess. Feel free to comment down below. I may do a follow-up video if we get enough comments through to have a further chat. I do like chatting with the community. I do like that you feel that you can be open. And I really appreciate that people have been upfront and constructive about the issues that we're facing at the moment. Alrighty, enjoy yourselves, and hopefully we see some better things coming along in the future. Have fun, folks. See you later.
We played a game.